Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week, economy, stocks. Everything is in a free fall, it seems. We have an escalation in the nuclear possible war with Russia and Ukraine. We have natural organic food markets just accidentally going on fire in Paris. And we even have the stock market it's not doing well at all. And we have a possible much harder, I would say, situation with the food production situation, not surprisingly due to Hurricane Ian. Not only did he devastate Florida, but also he devastated some fertilizer plants. We'll get into that in just a moment. So last 7 weeks, we've had 6 weeks negative. Just this quarter alone, January, February, March, April, May, June. So July, August, September. As of last week, we didn't finish the third trimester yet, but we've lost $9 trillion in world stocks just in the third quarter alone. The first 2 quarters, the number off the top of my head, don't quote on this, it was 20-something trillion dollars. All the stock markets were down heavily in the US and Canada. The Dow has been down 2,000 points since election day. It's now at its lowest point since March 2020, and S&P 500 had its 4th worst start of the year ever. Now, one of the things that's really important, and I want to kind of delve into this because interest rates have not been as important as they are now due to the fact that we have a much higher leveraged economy, meaning that we have a lot more debt. When I was younger in high school, even though I didn't pay attention that much to the markets until I was in the latter part of high school and college, I didn't even know who the head of the central bank was. Like, nobody talked about that, right? Because we weren't in this much debt. We maybe had if we're at 30-something trillion, if I'm not mistaken now, which means that's just the official debt. That's not the unfunded liabilities. But, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we weren't even at 5 or 10 trillion. So we have a situation now that because the economy is such highly leveraged, interest rates are extremely sensitive because everybody's basically living on debt. We've had, I want to get these numbers out. If I remember these off the top of my head, a $600,000 house in 2021 with a 2.95% mortgage rate, the mortgage would be about $2,400. That same $600,000 house with the 7.08% mortgage rate that we have today, the mortgage payment on that would be over $4,000. So it's literally almost doubled in price. And that's basically what's happening with the interest rates because everybody's, there's been this huge boom since 2008, 2009. That's what? 2008 to 18 is 10 years. You add on another 4 for 2022. So we're talking 14, going on 15 years now of just record low interest rates where there's just bubbles everywhere. And now since the interest rates are going up, we just can't continue the party because now the cost of everything is going up. And that's basically what's happening. There is $93.5 trillion of total debt in the economy. That's the federal debt, that's corporate debt, and that's personal debt in the United States. And we have a 19 trillion economy. So if you do the math on that, 2, 4, 6, 8, we're talking about over 4.5 times the amount of debt in the economy, which wasn't the same situation that we had before. And that's why the interest rates are so sensitive. So the more they increase the interest rates, the more pain we can continue to feel. Now remember, even though we're walking into hard times, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do well. Right. And I started saying this a few weeks, repeatedly in the videos because I don't want you guys to think that, it's the end of the world and the zombies are coming and right. But remember that in times of crisis during the Depression in 1929, 1930s, most millionaires created in history. So keep that in mind because whenever there's a crisis, there's always an opportunity to make money. Overseas markets, European markets, mostly negative as well. Russia was the biggest loser there at almost 7%. Latin America, all of them are lower in single digits. Africa and the Middle East, mostly lower except for South Africa, which went up 0.48%. And then in the far, far East, mostly negative with the Philippines crashing over 9%. Bitcoin and cryptos, NFT volumes have now collapsed 97% since January. That goes to show that if you guys thought a monkey with a gold chain around its neck was actually valuable, it doesn't value anything anymore. There was a video I was seeing out on Instagram or TikTok. I don't have TikTok, but they put all the TikTok videos on Instagram now. There was one of these monkey things, one of these pictures they bought for $630,000 and now it's worth $10. So be careful out there. CBDCs, the central banks, which I very, very kindly call government coins, which I've mentioned to you guys is what I think the future is going to be of crypto. Remember that there's two kind of systems in crypto. There's the actual cryptocurrency, and then you have the blockchain, which is the technology that the crypto uses. And blockchain has been used in other things, for example, real estate transactions and other things as well. So digital ruble is now being used with settlements with China, meaning that China is now using the government coin from Russia to settle their debt, or at least part of their debt. Now, this is significant because, we're walking into this new world order where they want to feed us crickets and everything, right? So it's really interesting to me because now the world, on top of the interest rate situation that we had that I just explained to you a moment ago, there has been 40% more dollars printed since the pandemic than existed before the pandemic. Now, before all of the countries around the world, over 70% of the currency reserves, I want to say 30, 40 years ago, were in dollars. It's now sitting at about 59%. So the more countries use dollars less, the less and less that they use dollars, the more those dollars are going to come home. Now, if we just think about a standard supply and demand situation where there's a lot of product of something, like, like Skittles or, TVs or, whatever. Whenever there's a lot of a product, the value goes down, right? That's why in technology, as things get better, they get cheaper over time because it makes it more accessible. It's what Elon Musk did with Tesla, for example, made a super expensive race car, the Tesla Roadster, and now he's doing the mass market and he's bringing down the price of everything. When there isn't a lot of something, like Rolls Royce, Rolex, the prices are through the roof. So as those dollars start coming home, we're going to have a much bigger problem with the inflation because now 40%, there's more dollars outside of the U.S. than are in the U.S. So after those dollars start coming back home to roost, as more and more countries stop using the dollar, because remember, before in the petrodollar system, everybody had to get dollars and then pay the things they needed. Whereas now they're just, using the government coin of Russia, for example. They're just doing direct bilateral trade. Now, another thing that I found really interesting is the IMF is the International Monetary Fund, which is, think of it like another central bank, but not a central bank of a country, but a central bank of several countries, or the world kind of bank, right? They have a currency called the SDR, which is called a special drawing right. Now, keep in mind that currency in the history of the world was always a piece of paper, or, they've used seashells, for example, for currency. Gold and silver has been kind of the de facto kind of currency for ages before the dollar was connected to gold, right? What's going to happen now when the central bank, not central bank, but the IMF just creates their own currency out of thin air? Well, this is what I've always kind of told you guys that I think is happening, where they're deliberately creating this crisis. Get that button handy. They're deliberately creating this crisis so we all have to use this new system. The government coin, the cricket fries and all this stuff. So there, and this is from the IMF website, a virtual SDR, which the SDR, remember, is like the dollar for the IMF, the special drawing rights. A virtual SDR could facilitate the SDR's use in private transactions. Creating a global crypto could circulate along with national and regional cryptos backed by central banks. So what I think is going to happen is there's so much debt, we're going to have a financial crisis, then the IMF is going to start borrowing money in their government coin to the US and Europe. You see how that works? And then we're all going to be just, bend over because they're going to give it to you. That was a good one, wasn't it? Bitcoin was up higher this week, up 1.51%. It closed at just a touch over 19,000. In the food production space, things are getting a little bit hairy here as well. Food production may be at risk. There's a company called Mosaic Coast that has phosphate rock assets that was in the way of Hurricane Ian. So this hurricane knocked out their processing plant, let's call it, and it's 50% of North American granular phosphate fertilizer and about 12% of the global supply. So not only do we have this problem with the world shipping lanes and supply constraints and even the fertilizer and food production because of the situation with the war in Ukraine and Russia, but now we even have another fertilizer plant that's gone under, which is going to complicate things even more. Now, this isn't going to be shown directly, right? Because it's kind of it's a bit of a delay, but I think in 2023, 2024, when there isn't enough fertilizer, the fertilizer is 10 times more expensive to grow the crops that we eat. Because remember that food doesn't come from a grocery store, it comes from a farm where they need fertilizer to grow the food, right? That's when we're going to start to see these problems. And now would be the time to get ready. Because when I mentioned to you guys for the first time in 2020, I think it was November 2020, when I first talking about the food shortages, you could have bought food then at probably 20% cheaper, 30% cheaper than what you bought it now. And those prices are going to continue going higher. Rungis, which is the largest wholesale fresh produce market in the world, is on fire in Paris. Another food place that's gone on fire. Dun, 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 dun. Preppers were right. Germany's frozen and food fresh Let me start over. Germany's frozen and fresh food producers are warning that tongue twister. Let me start one more time. Here we go, guys. Germany's frozen and fresh food producers are warning that energy prices are soon going to force them to stop operations, meaning that some are even preparing for insolvency. So I want you to kind of wrap this around your brain. We've had over 100 food processing plants that have accidentally caught fire. 2 of them had airplane crashes. 1 is like strange. 2, so over 100 food processing plants. We've had those organic markets, I think it was in Sweden or Finland, that was backed by Bill Gates, that caught fire. Now we have the largest fresh produce market in the world catching fire. We have the war in Ukraine and Russia not allowing for enough fertilizer and also grains for the world to be able to come out. A hurricane just took out 12% of the phosphate fertilizer supply, global supply. And now we have producers of food in Germany saying that the energy costs are getting so high, they're just going to have to close. But everything's fine. Don't worry. It'll be fine. Monday, oil prices hit 9-month lows because of the absolute explosion in the US dollar. The US index hit a 2-decade high versus a basket of 6 currencies. The US oil actually went up, which is surprising because it should be inverse to the US dollar. So the US crude went up by 0.95%, while Brent went over 2%. And then gold sunk to its lowest level in the early days of the pandemic last week, almost in a bear market. It's almost at 20% off its peak in March. London Metal Exchange is launching a quote-unquote discussion paper to see about a potential ban of the new supplies on the Russian metals. This is a big problem because Russia is a huge supplier of global metals in the world, including aluminum, copper, nickel, even gold and silver. And there's a lot of fears that if that's disrupted, there could be another squeeze. There could be just an explosion in prices. Gold went up over 1% to 1662. Well, my favorite market, as you guys know, over 1%. Silver went up over 1% at 1913. Financial news with the US dollar absolutely exploding. The yuan has just hit its lows not seen since 2008. The yuan, which is the South Korean currency, hit the weakest level since 2009. The Indian rupee, remember India, if I'm not mistaken, now is the 5th largest economy in the world. They've gone down 10% against the US dollar. And even the pound in England went down to its lowest level in history at 1.03. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to level out the US dollar, the pound, and also the euro to launch kind of this new cryptocurrency, the government coins, just to kind of, they're all even, you know what I mean? Another thing in the China space is the People's Bank of China, which is the central bank of China, is increasing its risk on being able to do forward sales on Forex. So it's going from 0% to 20%. And basically what that means is they're going to make it more expensive to short the yuan because of the currency crisis that they're having. And September 14th, the 10 biggest investment banks generated $56.4 billion in revenue in 2022. Now that sounds really good, but that's a 39% decline from last year. And even them, being the big banks, are seeing a huge hit from what's going on in the economy. Chase said that the Q3 investment banking fees are down 45 to 50% from a year ago. So, everybody's getting hit pretty hard. Wednesday, Bank of England had to reverse course, seeing to try to stop the meltdown of their bond markets. They literally had we had a Lehman moment in 2008 and 2009. This is kind of what happened in the UK. The cost of borrowing money for the UK government overtook Greece and Italy, which are notorious for being super expensive because you can't trust anybody in those socialist countries, right? And so what they had to do is they had to go out and buy a significant amount of their debt, because otherwise they would have just collapsed the financial markets. Because with the drop in the pound, the significant drop in such short a time, there's a lot of pension funds that are invested in that. And that would have froze the mortgage markets. It just would have collapsed everything. And then obviously, sixth largest economy in the world, collapsing financial markets means the whole world goes down. Germany inflation soared to double digits for the first time in 70 years at 10.9%. European inflation hit 10%, which is the highest level since the euro was created in 1999. And Zuckerberg, unfortunately, lost half of his fortune, a staggering $76.8 billion. And he's fell on the most richest list from number 3 to number 11. He's now worth only $57.7 billion this year. And that's from obviously stocks just collapsing worldwide. In political news, I'd like to thank the first female PM in Italy, Giorgia Meloni, the first female Prime Minister of Italy. She didn't get a very good reception from the media due to the fact that she's not a communist. Putin gives the Edward Snowden Russian citizenship. If you guys don't remember, Edward Snowden was the person who put a light on the illegal monitoring, which is still going on by the US government. Economic news, the German economic sentiment deteriorated rapidly in September. In addition to that, the sentiment of the economic sentiment in Europe also plummeted as well. This is a big problem for the economy because remember that consumer spending is the vast majority of most economies worldwide, including Germany, Europe. Most advanced economies, the United States, is almost 70%. So if you have economic sentiment plummeting, that means that people are scared about what's going to happen, which means that they're going to spend less money, which means that the economy moves less, which means very bad. Very, very not bueno for everybody. Shares in Apple fell almost 5% on Thursday, after they told their suppliers to abandon plans to ramp up production. I think people, obviously because of the economy, but most people are starting to notice that buying a new phone is kind of like the same thing as the old phone. So I kind of want to keep my $1,000. Their stock is down almost 20% in 2022. Shares of the EV maker, I want to turn on the lights here because I think it'll be fine. Let me do this. There we go. That's much better. What else we got here? Tesla fell 6.81%. As one analyst talked about, they're cutting their delivery estimates. So their stock is down almost 24% for the year. Nike shares are down a lot since they reported a growth in sales for Q3, 4% growth, but they had a 22% collapse in net income due to freight costs and higher discounts. They now have $9.7 billion in inventory last quarter. That's an increase of 44%. So they're obviously not doing well either. You can see all the red flags that are going up now, right, with the economy. Amazon is scheduling another big sale on October 11th and 12th called Prime Early Access for everybody that has Prime in 15 countries. And Porsche finished 2% above their IPO price, which is going to value the company at about $75 billion. In trade news and on the food front, Russia's wheat harvest has reached a historic 100 million tons because of the amount of wheat that they normally had, and it's sold on the global market. They normally kind of leveled out prices. But now because of the war and everything that's happening with Ukraine, that's not going to happen, which means that the price of wheat and other prices of food are probably going to continue their historic rise. In technology, SpaceX is going to start offering their internet service in Iran, as Elon Musk talked about that in a tweet. Now that the United States has easing sanctions in the country of Iran to be able to go ahead and receive the tech from SpaceX. This is following a death of a 22-year-old that was put into custody, which caused protests and revolution. And one of the ironies of this situation is we wouldn't have this problem with the government of Iran if we, the US, didn't overthrow them to begin with years ago. NASA hits an asteroid in their planetary defense test, which is ironic because they're not going to know for over a decade whether we actually moved the direction of the orbit of the asteroid a few inches. How do I explain this to you? This is what I think. The reason why I think this is happening now is because I think we're going to walk into a lot more problems over the next, I said 10 years in 2020, but we're going to have a lot more social problems, a lot more environmental problems, a lot more economic problems. And I think they know what's coming. In international news, Finland is shutting its border with Russia as military-age men flee Russia because they don't want to get into the new 300,000 draft that Russia did for their military. And U.S. has warned catastrophic consequences for Russia if they use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. And also, the Nord Stream 1 and 2 were blown up this week. Nobody knows what happened. Supposedly, it was a quote-unquote terrorism event. The U.S. Embassy is urging all Americans in Russia to leave. And also, Florida and North Carolina, as I mentioned, you guys, Hurricane Ian, thank God it didn't go to Tampa, my hometown. But it's one of the strongest storms that ever hit the United States, causing anywhere between $30 to $50 billion in damage. Could be the costliest storm since Hurricane Andrew. So I hope all you guys are safe. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And always remember, the preppers were right.